Hello and welcome to Checking the Vitals, a podcast powered by SpecialtyCare. I'm Todd Schlosser, and today our guest is Charles Clarke, an entrepreneurial perfusionist in Ventura, California. In this conversation, we discuss why he changed careers from respiratory therapy to perfusion, how he turned that career into a business, and how his perception of SpecialtyCare changed as they partnered with his perfusion company. Enjoy the conversation. Well, Charles, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it. You're actually the first perfusionist we've talked to on this podcast, so I'm excited to sort of dig into the weeds about sort of what you do and sort of why you went there. But I'd like to start off with what it was that brought you to a career in healthcare.
Well, it's actually kind of comical. My wife and I met when we were in college, and I really had no idea what I wanted to do. She was going into nursing and became a surgical nurse. I took a aptitude type test and it said, oh, you should go into respiratory therapy. So I was like, okay, that sounded good. I could stay in school with her and work in the hospital. So we both graduated at Loma Linda University, got jobs at Loma Linda University Medical Center. And I was a respiratory therapist in the operating room.
Oh, okay.
And part of my duties there, we did the ACTs for the cardiac surgery for the perfusionist. That was back in the old days when we had a handheld diatomaceous earth tube, and we would shake it and hold it over a light. And then we also ran blood gases for them.
Okay.
So I was involved in respiratory therapy for about 4 years, and I grew a little disillusioned with it. It's like, I don't think I want to do this the rest of my life. And I was looking at opportunities, and the perfusionist there, who I became very good friends with, my mentor, said, hey, we're going to be having a change. The perfusion group worked for the nurses, but they were going to go to work for the surgeons group. And there were 3 people who were perfusionists at Loma Linda at that time. 2 of them were full-time perfusionists. One was an RN who did RN duties. And when the change transferred over, the RN was going to quit perfusion. The other fellow was going to leave. And so they needed another perfusionist. This was in 1980. I started in 1980. So I was grandfathered in for the American boards. You still had to prove that you had the caseload. You had to prove that you had education and training.
Sure.
In 1981, they passed a clause that you had to graduate from an accredited program. But I started in 1980, so I fit in underneath the clause. I was an OJT, trained on the job.
Sure.
Took my boards in 1981, passed the writtens, took the orals. Back then they actually had orals where you had to go into 2 rooms and 2 examiners could ask you anything for 30 minutes in 2 rooms and pass the orals. And so I kind of fell into it. And it was something that I really enjoyed. At Loma Linda, we did the full complement of all types of procedures from neonates and infants to adults. And so the first year that I was there with my mentor, back then Loma Linda at that time did about 360 cardiac cases, 1980, and I pumped 300 of them. Because I wanted to do them all.
Yeah.
I wanted to get as much experience.
You were on the job training.
Yeah, and I wanted to get as much experience as possible. And so that's how I started.
Awesome.
Perfusion.
So if you don't mind me asking, how did perfusion differ from sort of what you went to school for and started out in?
Well, respiratory therapy is a great introduction into perfusion.
Is it?
You understand all the physiology of a gas transfer. You already have all the basic anatomy.
Right.
You have a lot of the prerequisites that are really necessary for perfusion. And I think a lot of perfusionists now, or I've known a lot that went into respiratory therapy, got a degree, and then went into perfusion. So it was a great springboard into perfusion.
Excellent. So, and one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you on the podcast was because you have done perfusion for so long, so you're sort of well respected in the industry, and you've got a lot of, let's just say, a long track record of, perfusion. But you also took an entrepreneurial approach to it. So, I'd like to sort of shift into that. But let me ask, how long were you? I hate to say just a regular perfusionist, but just a perfusionist at the hospital before you decided, hey, I could make a business of this.
Sure. I worked at Loma Linda for about 6 years.
Okay.
And then I went across town and joined another group who worked for the surgeons over there. Mm-hmm. in San Bernardino. I worked there for 3 years, and one of the surgeons there left and went down to South Florida. And he took myself and his PA with him.
Okay.
And we went down to a large program down there. The 2 surgeons and the perfusionists that were there left. I actually contracted with him then, so I was on my own. That was part of one of the things that I made sure and to tell him that I wanted to do. He was a very fast surgeon. He was very good. The first year, the 3 of us, meaning the PA, the surgeon, myself,
Right.
we did 542 cases.
So you were the pump on 542 cases in a year?
By myself. This is in 1989, and back then there was a huge shortage of perfusionists, and I couldn't find anybody to come help and join me. And I didn't leave town for a year. My record was 26 hearts in 1 week. And the reason they were able to do it so fast is while we were doing a case, the anesthesiologist would line out the next patient down in the pre-op. They would put the introducer in. They'd do everything but float the swan. The nurses would totally set up the room in the instruments, everything necessary in the room right next door. As soon as we were off bypass and the patient was closed, they left the room. They had a team of nurse techs come in, and in 5 minutes they cleaned the room. Boom, they wheeled all the stuff in, and we jumped right into the next case.
So it's like Henry Ford built your hospital because it was like an assembly line.
Yeah, and back then, of course, patients were a lot less sicker. Angioplasties were just starting to become a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Most everybody had a normal ventricle. They all came off bypass. There was no retrograde cardioplegia. So it was a different patient population than we experience today.
That's something I've talked about with some cardiac surgeons we've talked to, that just the population and the amount of people they're having to do bypass on younger. It's even changing the technique they use. Like the double mammary technique is more commonly used on younger patients. So stuff like that's very interesting to me. But 542 cases is a lot compared to in 1980 when you started, you did 300, and the whole hospital did 360. So you were doing quite a bit more than that in a year.
Well, and that's what happened is, I didn't see my children awake during the week.
Yeah.
My wife and I didn't have time together. We were kind of going in different directions. And although I was doing very well financially, I realized that, this isn't what life is about.
Yeah.
And so after 2 years down there, I left and came back out to California. And a friend of mine was a co-owner of a perfusion group in the Ventura and Oxnard area. Mm-hmm. And they had another perfusionist. They invited me to come out. There were 4 of us. And about a year after I came out, my friend left. I became a partner in the business because I was always very interested in running my own business. I have a degree in business administration.
Oh, okay.
And so I was very interested in doing that. And it became the ideal opportunity. I had another fellow who was a partner, and about 6 years ago, he retired out, and I became the sole owner of the company.
Okay. So I hate to say you sort of fell into it, but you were sort of recruited to come work at this group, and then eventually,
I was looking to come back to California.
Right.
And I actually interviewed at a couple other places. One was in Northern California. One was farther south in kind of the Los Angeles area, and I really wasn't interested in that area. And then, out of the clear blue, my friend called me. Ventura is just a marvelous place, a coastal town, 60 miles north of LA on the coast. And it just really was a answer to prayer that we were able to have opportunity to come back, and it's ended up very well.
Yeah, it seems like all the pieces fit. And then you also get to sort of incorporate your business administration background, and now you're sort of running that group. And how long have you been running it? Has it just been the 6 years since the last partner left?
I came out in 1991.
Okay.
And I became a partner in 1993.
Oh, okay. So it's been a while then.
And then there were 3 of us that were partners. My friend left in 1995, 96, something like that. So there were 2 of us that were partners from that time until about 2014 or 15 when the other senior guy retired. Mm-hmm. But I was managing the company the whole time because he didn't have any business experience, and
sure.
So it was easier for me to be able to run things. And he was very appreciative of that because
Sure, I would
it was
be
very
too.
good for both of us. And,
Yeah.
and financially, it worked well for him too. So
It also probably provided you a little bit more of a work-life balance than you were experiencing in South Florida.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So you sort of grew that business over the course of, what is that, 15, almost 20 years?
Yeah,
at
well,
this
I
point?
I came in 91,
Yeah.
so that's...
It's closing on 20, right?
Well, it's
No,
it's
30.
closing on to 30 years.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
it's
I just
29
realized I'm
years.
much older than I thought I was. So
It goes that fast.
it really does. So you, if you don't mind me asking, when you started in 91, about how many perfusionists did you have on the team? Not necessarily partners, but on the team.
There were 4 of us at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, between the 2 community programs, we were doing about 550, 560 hearts.
Okay. At multiple hospitals or just one particular?
2 cardiac programs,
Okay.
2 community programs that did cardiac surgery. Then we did auto transfusion at 2 other small
Okay.
community hospitals. We did a fair amount of auto transfusion back then too.
Yeah.
And of course, over the course of that last 29 years, we've seen a significant decline in cardiac cases
Yeah.
due to so much interventional procedures and stuff, and a significant decline in the auto transfusion cases, certainly in the vascular area,
Mm-hmm.
as they've incorporated endografts and all that.
Yeah.
We still do a fair amount of auto transfusions for spinal cases, which is primarily what we do the auto transfusion for. At the 2 community programs that we've contracted with, we've been the only perfusion group there
Okay.
ever. So we did have a longevity,
Mm-hmm.
excellent relationship with both programs. One hospital in Oxnard is a Dignity Health, now Common Spirit. There's been a few surgeons that have come through there, and it was last year that the caseload went down so much that it just wasn't possible to continue to provide the service for the compensation we were getting. So I approached the hospital with a minimum compensation package based on our billing cycle, which we already had instituted at the other hospital, and they were hesitant and reluctant to do that.
Sure.
And so they notified us that they were not going to renew the contract last year. And we had, even though the surgeon was very disappointed, he had worked tirelessly with administration to try to get something worked out because he didn't want to see a change.
Well, he'd been working with you guys for years at this point, I
Yeah,
imagine.
and he didn't want to see a change, but to no avail. The administration was going to take a different path, and we knew SpecialtyCare was coming in.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, okay, be that as it may, that'll be what happened. And then John Dunbar and Chris Wiedekind contacted me
Mm-hmm.
And wanted to meet to discuss mutually beneficial opportunities.
Sure.
And I'd been thinking about this for a long time. In the meantime, there was another SpecialtyCare person that already contacted one of my employees. Right now, there's 3 of us that are perfusionists.
Okay.
We've gone down to 3 perfusionists and an auto transfusionist.
Okay.
And offered him a job through SpecialtyCare. And he discussed the potential with them and indicated a salary requirement that he would need, and they got back to him that was not going to be possible to work that out with him.
Right.
So I met with John and I met with Chris Wiedekind, and I had never really had any involvement with anybody from SpecialtyCare.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, I have to say that I did not have a favorable view of SpecialtyCare and situations. It had been well known in the past that they had come in and just taken over. A hospital invited him in. In fact, it happened to a friend of mine in close proximity where we are, who had a private group.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to retire. We were in discussions. I was going to buy his group.
Oh, you were going to sort of absorb that business.
Absorb it and
Sure.
buy it. And the week before my attorney had everything ready for him, he got called in by a surgeon who he didn't have a good relationship with. And surgeon said, I have good news and bad news. He goes, the bad news is that your contract is done today. The good news is that SpecialtyCare will offer you a job. And
But he was wanting to retire.
But he did, he was wanting to, but he didn't. And he had 2 or 3 other perfusionists, and they all agreed to go to work for SpecialtyCare.
Okay.
And, which was what happened or has happened in most situations, especially in a small program, a small community. You live there, your family's there, your kids go to school. Even though there's a lot of perfusion jobs out there now, people just don't want to pick up and move.
Yeah, once you put your roots down, you sort of want to stay.
Right,
yeah.
and so that's what happened. In the past, historically in the past, specialty care used to come in and buy small contract groups. But they have ceased to do that because it hasn't been necessary for them. So I met with John and Chris, and I said, well, you want to discuss mutually beneficial opportunities, and I go, the reality is that you really have nothing to offer me, because I know for a fact that you don't have the manpower to cover the program. You don't. You need us. And I said, I would like to propose this, that we subcontract the perfusion services back to you. It's a specialty care contract. We adhere to all of the requirements that you might have as far as data collection, perfusion performance, whatever. We will be specialty care perfusionists, but I will maintain my company. I'll take care of all of the salary requirements and benefit requirements and vacation and all that for my guys, my people. We'll totally control the schedule, and you won't have any worries about it. And we'll subcontract back to you for a flat monthly fee.
Sure. Not to dig into the details, you don't have to tell me the figures, but it's sort of like what you offered that hospital that they declined, except...
Well, the funny thing is that the hospital, if they would agree to it, we probably would have done it for less.
Well, we don't have to tell them that.
No, we won't. Yeah. Well, and because guess what? The hospital is the one who lost out.
Yeah.
And you know what? It has worked out very, very well for us.
Yeah.
Specialty care has been there to support us if we've needed help, although we haven't needed any clinical help, but there is that backup available.
You mean like if someone goes down or wants to take vacation?
If I have an issue or something and I absolutely need them to send somebody in, they have a contract that's very close. They've got a couple of people from there that are already credentialed at the hospital, and they could help us. They haven't needed to.
Sure.
And it just has really been a very mutually beneficial relationship, and I look forward to continuing it. And I look forward to possibly looking to expand the opportunity with them in other areas. And I think it's a good model for somebody who has a small contract perfusion group, because the reality is that if the hospital wants to contract specialty care, you really don't have a choice. But as I said, the manpower issue for specialty care is huge, and this model allows the small contract owner to maintain his group, to maintain his personnel, to provide for all of them as he has been, and to be able to support specialty care in their relationship and services with the hospital.
Yeah.
And it's a win-win.
It sounds like it, because specialty care gets all of your expertise, not just yours, but your employees as well. And you guys, or whatever group it is, gets to maintain the relationships with the hospital that they've spent years cultivating.
And there's no transition phase.
Yeah.
There's no phase. It goes from one day to this under my group to the next day under specialty care, but nothing changes.
Yeah.
The hospital still has the same people providing the services, the same personnel, the same relationships with anesthesia, nursing, the cardiac surgeons, the cardiologist. It's a seamless transition.
Yeah, and I know, because I've talked to some surgeons, that their team, quote unquote, is very important to them, and maintaining the team, whether it's superstition or just the trust that gets built up around that team. So that's important to people who are in the room doing that work that patient needs done, because ultimately that's what it's about, sort of providing those better patient outcomes. And if your surgeon's happier with this team, there's a lot of benefit in keeping that team intact. And I realize it's more than just the perfusionists, but they are integral in that team.
Well, and it's especially important in smaller programs that don't do large numbers. If you're a community program doing 100, 150, even maybe 200 a year, everybody gets into a rhythm. They get into a groove. I know what my surgeons want before they ask me for it, because I've pumped for them for so long, and I know their movements. I understand the flow of the case. I know what they're doing, and it's hard to duplicate that if you have somebody you don't have years of experience with.
Yeah. It's more than just being good at the job. It's being good with this other teammate, if you will.
Yeah, I've had many perfusionists over the years as a private employer that have come and gone for various reasons, and I've told them that, you know, we're in a unique situation in the operating room, sitting behind the heart-lung machine, because we see the big picture of the whole room. Mm-hmm. We see anesthesia, we see the circulating nurse, we see the table. You know, if they drop a Raytech on the floor, we see it. It happens right in front of us. We're stuck right there. Mm-hmm. And so we have an opportunity to support everybody in the room and to be a help and to identify a situation with a potential problem before it occurs. Mm-hmm. And so I've tried to reinforce that you know, we're in a very unique situation to support everybody in that room.
So if you don't mind, when did this transition take place where you're now subcontracting through SpecialtyCare?
This happened, well, John and I were just talking about it. It was over 6 months ago.
Okay.
Actually, I think we started preparing for it about 30 to 45 days beforehand, mm-hmm. And it happened, I believe, October 1st.
Okay.
For me, I was most appreciative of it because, as I'm sure a lot of perfusionists in administrative positions will know, that some hospital administration is easier to deal with than others.
You mean as far as the staff you have to deal with?
Well, as far as the administration,
Sure.
the vice president of nursing and all that. And
sure.
So that hospital in particular was very difficult to deal with. And so once that transition took place, that eliminated all of those issues. I didn't have to deal with them anymore.
Right.
About stuff. And actually, it seemed like it's been smoother since then, even in dealing with SpecialtyCare administration. And, you know, I'm not sure why that is. Maybe the fact they think they have a big, huge perfusion group now, which SpecialtyCare is. Mm-hmm. And certainly they're a lot more accustomed to dealing with administrative concerns and whatnot. And so the transition was actually very easy and quite pleasant.
So did your employees take to it quickly as well? Or, I mean, do they even really see a day-to-day difference?
No, the big day-to-day difference is that I used to get the surgery schedule sent to me every day. Now they contact 800 number with SpecialtyCare, and so SpecialtyCare lets us know if there's a case tomorrow. Although most often the surgeon will communicate, or
sure.
We know.
Because you have those pre-existing
So there's a little different communication arena set up. There was some difficulties in the transition, and I believe we were a test site. They had iPads and a new system of billing and all that.
Yeah. I happen to know that the core rollout was happening right around that time.
And we were one of the test places in the area. And I'm not sure why they decided to do it for us being a brand new account.
Have those kinks sort of been worked out?
Yeah, that's pretty much all resolved now.
And all of that is in service of that bigger data collection that you sort of referenced a little bit earlier, right. Which now I'd imagine, because you're subcontracting through SpecialtyCare, you now have access to all of that.
Yeah, and you know, that's a significant benefit to not only hospital administration, but to the cardiac surgeons, especially in a smaller program. What are the metrics? How do you compare with other hospitals and other programs? And that, I think, probably is one of the things I was most excited about. One of them, I'm most excited about joining SpecialtyCare is being part of that data collection. Because that's huge. I mean, data is very valuable and can be used in a myriad of beneficial ways.
Yeah, and all in service, again, of making the surgery safer and sort of better outcomes for the patients.
Right.
So through this agreement with SpecialtyCare, you have sort of maintained your autonomy to some extent, and it seems like you even described it as a win-win. Is it something that you might recommend to other people who are in your situation as a small perfusion business owner?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the benefits far outweigh the disadvantages. Mm-hmm. You know, and most smaller contract owners, smaller perfusion groups are like me. They've been in place for many years. Yeah. They have long-standing relationships with both the surgeons and the hospital personnel and whatnot. And the reality is that if SpecialtyCare comes in, you really, prior to this, I didn't know of anybody else that had done this. You really didn't have any choices. You either picked up and moved and left, or you agreed to become a specialty care employee. And this now offers a small business owner, small contract owner, a different mode, a different way to continue on with your business, and yet to become part of the specialty care family, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the hospital then gets to realize the benefits that they expect and wanted out of having a specialty care contract. Specialty care gets the benefits of having the perfusionists already in place, not having to deal with manpower issues, relocation issues, maybe having people come in and out and support a program. The manpower is already there. All of the components are in place. And so it is, as I described, a win-win for everybody.
It even seems better for the hospital, too.
Yeah, well, it's not looking at the financial side because I don't know the
ins and outs of that.
The ins and outs of that, but certainly, specialty care is very happy with our situation. We're very happy with our situation with them. And I really look forward to continuing on with it and extending it over and over and over, however many times is necessary to continue on our relationship.
It's interesting to me because it feels sort of like, like small rural town, and then a Walmart moves in and all these mom and pop shops sort of shut down, except in this situation, specialty care moves in, and it sort of can be, under this model, a benefit to the small business owner in that rural town, quote unquote.
Well, and it's interesting that you bring that up because that's one of the discussions I had with one of the administrators many months before this occurring. And we knew it was coming, and he was sympathetic to our situation, and he said he preferred to have local people part of the community and support the community. Because you contribute to a community in many ways. And we use the Walmart example where Walmart will come in and pretty soon the mom and pop hardware store, the little grocery store, they're gone.
Right.
And yet in our example, it would be as if you had John Smith's hardware store, Walmart came in, and it would say Walmart at the top, but John Smith's hardware store, and John Smith still ran the store and still had it, and he would get all the advantages of what Walmart had to offer, but yet it would still be the John Smith hardware store.
Yeah.
And so that's, in that scenario, it truly is a win-win for everybody.
So for me, if I was working for you and I just heard that specialty care was coming in and taking over the account, but good news, we were now going to be subcontractors through specialty care, I would get very nervous. So what are some of the benefits of you now being a subcontractor and not just transitioning to, employment through specialty care, but subcontracting through specialty care?
Well, one of the big benefits in subcontracting with them, as I mentioned earlier, is not having to deal with all the administrative issues. The other financial benefit to the company is that we subcontracted them for a guaranteed flat amount. So the company's income is not dependent on the caseload. So it's stabilized a lot of that financial fluctuation. And
I'd imagine some of the worry
on
your side of it.
And if we're busy, then I'm happy for that because specialty care is going to, get the benefit. And I certainly know or I expect that they have a contract that is, guarantees them money from the hospital. And yet it's allowed me as the private owner to tailor and customize maybe financial needs and or benefits for my employees that specialty care couldn't do.
Sure.
They couldn't, you couldn't go to them and say, wow, I really need this or would like that. And they can't do it for one person. It has to be company-wide.
Right.
So they have a lot bigger restrictions and rules and ways that they have to maintain the structure for their employees. Being a small business owner, I don't have to adhere to those. I own the company. I can basically do whatever I want. Sure. As long as my accountant and attorney agree to it and it's not illegal.
Right, absolutely.
But and we've done that in the past, with certain situations for possibly housing or transportation or a loan or an advance. I'm able to do that, and so it's a benefit to my employees because they still are part of a small group, but yet it's made the company a lot more financially stable.
Yeah.
Without ups and downs based on caseload.
in the scenario of Walmart moving into a rural area, everyone sort of hated Walmart in that situation. And I imagine that there are people who look at specialty care in that light. So let's say 2 to 5 years ago, what was your impression of specialty care versus now?
2 to 5 years ago, as I described a little bit earlier, I did not have a very good impression of specialty care. And it was due to ignorance on my part. The reality is that the profession of cardiac surgery and medicine is changing. And small contract groups like my own, probably 10 or 15 or 20 years now, are not going to be even around. There's going to be large groups, hospital employment, and specialty care. And so having to take this bad situation and turn it into an opportunity where now I have a very good relationship with specialty care. As I said, meeting with John, I mean, incredible man. Specialty care's vision, I think, is very appropriate for the field of perfusion and cardiac surgery. And they bring a lot to offer to perfusionists, not only in my situation, but throughout the entire cardiac surgery world. And that's headed in the right direction. And I think a lot of that's been evident in some of the very big name perfusionists that they have been able to acquire and attract to the company and to contribute to the educational side and whatnot. And you know, being in perfusion for 40 years, I've known some of these old timers, I call them, old timers like myself, and they're giants in perfusion. And if they see the opportunity in specialty care, that's what made me have a second look. It's like, you know what, maybe this is something I should take a better look at. And I have a few short years left, and I'm just very happy that I think we're going to end up in a good situation. And when I'm gone, there'll be very little transition for whoever takes over after me in the future.
Are those people like your Al Stammers and like your Linda Mongeros and those kind of people?
Yeah, exactly. Al Stammers, Jeff Riley. I just saw him earlier today. You know, some of the really, really big names. People that had huge contributions to both the clinical side and then also the political side too. And you know, I was kind of mad at Al Stammers when he joined because I thought, wow, you know, why couldn't you have started a group where you offered your services to small contractors, you know, a management service, so to speak. And he chose not to do that. But then now that I've come into the opportunity that I have and the situation that I have now, I think this is a much better opportunity and situation. And I'd be happy to talk to anybody who's in a similar situation, who has further questions. Or you want to know some more information.
To that end, how would they reach out to you?
Well, through John Dunbar, the specialty care rep. I'm probably not going to put my cell phone number on the podcast here, but my email, or I mean, they could share that with somebody if they specifically wanted.
Awesome.
I'd be very happy to talk to anybody.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, I could see as if I was a small business owner myself, I might prefer to talk to someone like you who was also in my quote unquote situation and why you chose to go the path you went and how it benefited you. So excellent. Well, Mr. Clarke, I really appreciate you taking the time to do
Charles,
this.
thank you very much.
So much, Charles.
I really appreciate the opportunity
to
sit down and discuss some of this with you. Perfusion's been very good to me, and I'm very happy to give back.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.